It's a windy day today, folks. Very windy. Given I'm right next to the coast, I mean, you can totally understand why. Pretty much been on cycle path all day today on my 3-hour endurance ride. It's been really nice getting back into this sort of zone 1, zone 2 training, if you're talking power zones. But any of you using lactate threshold, I mean, then we're just talking in LT1, below LT1, baby. Nice tailwind for the last half, which has been absolutely fab. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing, talking about endurance and steady state riding and building that sort of basic endurance, this isn't always the time of year that everybody does it. We're all different, we're all at different training phases, but it's really nice that it's coming back into fashion. I suppose it always does this time of year anyway, especially if you live in the northern hemisphere. But it's really nice that, like GCN for example, I'm putting a lot of content out there at the minute about zone 2 riding, but it's nice that it's getting this it's nice that it's getting in the limelight, and we're sort of not pushing the intense intervals and all that sort of training that we've seen for a long time over the last couple of years, I would say. And there's more and more content coming out now about this zone 2, and it's always been for me, and for me I've not really pushed that sort of training on this channel because it's never the sort of training that gets people fired up and gets them like amused. It is starting to become that way. Lots of people are accepting that you need to do that sort of riding, that low intensity, long steady state riding at some point in your training calendar, whether that be in the winter, whether it be in the summer. As long as you do it at some point, it brings you benefits, you know. And for those of us that have got time, you know, we can go off and knock out 7-hour rides and know that that's improving our stamina and endurance knowing. Now for me, it just so happens that this time of year traditionally is a good time for me to do this sort of riding, because for the most part I'm the furthest away out that I'll be from any of my goals, and I can increase volume quite safely without it impacting intervals or anything like that. And because I'm going to be doing some cyclocross, and obviously I'm Zwift racing about once or twice a week, it means I'm getting a little bit of intensity in. It's not completely compulsory.
Okay, now I'm back from my ride and I've finished eating my twirl. I can show you a real life example of what I meant earlier about this time of year, and the opportunity presents itself for me anyway for the next couple of weeks, probably the next month or two, where I can focus mainly on increasing the volume, and because of that reducing the intensity for the majority of my rides. Okay, so this is where we are currently, and we're just about to come into a 7-day, or I think it's actually an 8-day stage race on Zwift. We'll be racing 1 hour almost every day for the next, but around that I'm still going to keep the volume. I'm still going to make sure I keep those endurance rides in there. So 3.5 hours, 4 hours, 3.5 hours, then that hour race, then an hour and a half, 4 hours, and 5.5. You get the idea. Now, I appreciate that not everybody has the time or the mental energy to partake in multiple hours of training a day. But I'm just telling you what I'm doing. I'm just showing you what I'm doing. Of course, you can share your own personal experiences with doing volume-based training. And then, of course, when you do volume, you tend to reduce the intensity. So over the coming 10 days at least, I will have to monitor daily how I feel and address my training. So if I am scheduled to go and do a 4-hour ride and then do that 1-hour race in the evening, I need to make sure that I'm not pushing myself over a certain level in that endurance ride. I need to save it for. So that's giving me that little bit of intensity. And of course the race is not flat out the whole time, it's just little sections of the race that become hard. So again, for the vast majority of my riding this time of year, it's this very comfortable all-day pace. And like I said, it's really nice that you know, for the most part, we're getting more and more coverage of this steady state cycling now. If I search GCN Zone 2, for example, on YouTube, you know, a channel with over 1 million subscribers is starting to push this again, which is really nice to see. I'm biased because I like doing this sort of training, and I've always done this sort of training. And I think as well, you know, when we sometimes go away on a cycling holiday for like 5 days to Mallorca or whatever it may be, most of the time we only change one thing, and that is we ride longer. But by riding longer, you tend to naturally put a limit on how much you push yourself during that ride. And for me, it's always been actually more fun going longer and doing those rides than it has been doing high intensity intervals, mainly because they hurt, like really hurt. The only problem with it though is that it takes a lot of motivation, and I appreciate that if you're going to do any sort of training like this, it has to be, you have to think so far ahead. Like you have to think, you have to take away, like you have to take ego out of it. You have to take everything, the kudos you won't get on Strava, like the comments you won't get unless you go out and you do a 300k ride as part of your weekend training sessions, because going longer is going to benefit you. But it is a bit like that sort of cliche, you know, someone goes quiet for a couple of weeks because they're just putting in the work and nobody's seeing it, and it's just the grind that you don't see, and then they come out the other side and they're just like another level. And this sort of training is in some way that, like, you go a little bit dark in a sense that you know, it sort of passes people by, you know, from the outside. When you're going out and you're doing these long rides and you're doing them and it's like, there's no intervals, there's nothing there that sort of draws people in, you know. Oh, you've done 500 watts for 3 minutes, for 4 minutes, whatever it is. There's none of that. It's like, it's just, you're putting the work in for a future purpose. And like I said, there's no perfect time for it. It's like everybody does it at different times because it has to fit in with what you do, and sometimes you have to fit it in when you can. You know, if you've got a couple of days off of work for whatever it may be, then that could be your opportune moment to throw in some, you know, back-to-back 3-hour rides, for example. But you know, it is part of that thinking the long game. I'm doing this now so I can be somewhat better and more efficient, and giving my body that it needs to push on when it really matters. So it's why I'm so passionate about it.